I'm going to see participants come in.
Yep, you will. And I'm going to open it up right now.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, everyone. I think that we have our participants filing in. Yes, the numbers are growing. Thank you for joining us tonight. I know that there's a lot going on in the publishing world. There's a lot of events on offer. So we're really glad that you're here and that you're joining us for this great author panel. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am Carrie Obrey, the director of the Midwest Independent Booksellers Association, here with Larry Law, who is somewhat behind the scenes, the director of the Great Lakes Independent Booksellers Association. And together we produce Heartland Fall Forum along with Kate Scott. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors. As we all know, it's been another challenging year, but so many of our industry partners came through to show their support for independent booksellers. So please say thank you by spending some time on our website. Go check out the book room. It's very clickable. It's organized by state, genre, publisher. You can request a whole lot of ARCs. You can download Heartland's show specials. You can watch pre-recorded rep picks and also check out all of our forthcoming events, like these author events and like the education that we have on offer. Today's panel is called Spinning a Midwest Yarn, and it focuses on a collection of forthcoming titles that feature the Midwest as a part of the atmosphere, with characters whose struggles and joys are inextricably linked to where they live. We're going to start with a rapid round of author intros. We're going to move into conversation among our authors, and then we're going to end with open conversation for all. So please feel free to share your thoughts and questions generously in the chat field as we go. I'd like to thank booksellers Apryl Chapman and Stephanie Skees, who have volunteered to host today's event. Apryl Chapman, I want to turn your video on. She is a magical full-time bookseller at the Book Table in Oak Park, Illinois. She assists in displays, gifts, and all the knickknacks that surround the bookshop. She is an avid reader of many genres and authors, especially those authors from the Midwest. Thank you for being with us, Apryl. And Stephanie Skees is the Director of Operations for the Novel Neighbor in St. Louis, Missouri. She oversees all things staff, events, and social media, making special appearances on the store's TikTok feed. Her favorites shelf is overflowing, but she is always managing to find room for her favorite Midwest authors. So Apryl and Stephanie, why don't you take it from here? I think you're going to start by talking out a little bit about these hometown titles and how selling books to your customers is a little different when it has a strong regional hook.
Hey everyone, how are you today? So, sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Oh, it's good to see you. I mean, we've been on planning calls, but we're finally getting to do this panel. It's awesome.
I know, it's so exciting. I can't believe it. So we're just going to start off by we're just going to get right into it, introducing some of the authors that we have soon. We're going to go with...
Oh, wait. Well, real quick, can we talk about...
Before we get to them, yes, go right ahead.
I think we had talked a little bit as we were prepping for this event of not being from the Midwest and coming.
Yes, exactly. So it's really interesting. So I'm from Southern California. I just moved here to the Midwest 4 years ago in December, and it is definitely a different atmosphere, very different from, SoCal surfer individuals. But, the thing is about the Midwest that I have found is there is so much more camaraderie than there are in the coast, which is a really beautiful, people really do look out for each other. My first ever Midwest, working in a bookstore, seeing a Midwestern author, the book was called The Lager Queen of Minnesota.
Yes! What a great book.
Yeah, it was amazing. Jay was phenomenal, and so sweet and so compassionate. And, you know, he had a huge audience, and it was just really beautiful to see how many people really supported him. And, you know, he started reading an excerpt out of his book, and he actually started tearing up because he just felt, you know, he was like, I hadn't read that in 3 or 4 years. And, you know, it just really hit me in this moment, you know, with everyone here and everyone supporting me. And it was just one of the coolest things I think I've ever seen. And that's how I know, like, I felt, you know, felt more like home, you know. And it's actually really cool to call the Midwest home now. And especially with so many authors that come out of the Midwest that, you know, like one of the greatest authors, Toni Morrison, she's from the Midwest. It's crazy. Like, and, you know, and this might be a little weird. I don't want to say it's weird, but it's just so much love here. And also the folks in the Midwest, I feel like have a little bit more competitive side, which is really funny. Like, I never experienced that before, but it's true. And it's actually really cool because it makes me want to try my best as well as everyone else who's trying their best.
I love that so much. You know, we talked when I was getting to know a little bit about you of this like shift from California, and you were really making me like ruminate on the idea of community. And I think there is something really special that comes out of the Midwest. And you know, I've been a bookseller for several years. And so kind of right now, as I'm sure most people are feeling this, the timeline of like pre-pandemic and current pandemic. And, you know, we missed doing live events. All of us have had to pivot to, or many of us at least have had to pivot to a lot of these virtual events and, you know, Zoom webinar. But you know, we still have these amazing Midwest authors that our communities are showing up to support. And so, you know, something that I think we had this running joke for a long time, one of our local authors that had this amazing middle grade book come out, the book was called Your Life Has Been Delayed. And it's about, and that's a play on like it's an airplane and a bunch of other things that are part of it. And this book's publication was delayed like twice. And it was one of those like, are you kidding me? Like, she was like, did I manifest this accidentally? Like when I had titled my book this, that like this is gonna be delayed. But, and so we worked really closely. That was our first author, where as we, you know, as the vaccine came out and some other things shifted in our home state of Missouri, where we were able to like host these hybrid model events. Like, how can we still host her launch party? How can we do this, that she still gets all of the author's name is Michelle Mason, gets all of this like vibe and like the verb around like your book just coming out. And it was so cool to see her community show up for her. We were able to host like a watch party at our store. She was still able to have an in conversation with an author friend of hers that was not in the state of Missouri. And we were able to pull that off like virtually. And it just ended up being like a really great night. And we left that night just thinking about like how cool it was to be able to partake in these group community things. And so especially for a new author, which I know we have several of on our panel today, we have several new authors, which is very exciting. We were talking about that before this. So I think your comments really resonate with me, Apryl, of like what community looks like in the Midwest. And we're also competitive about it.
It's a little competitive, which is fine. Like, I think it's actually kind of funny. And I also feel like it's more realistic. Like, you know, there's glitz and glamour and, you know, on the coast, but like, I don't know, man. Sometimes we just ignore things. But I feel like with being here, it's definitely more honest, more realistic, and, you know, more loving.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Yes, we are. I think that's true. So that seems like the perfect note. I'm seeing some great comments. Thank you, Claire, for shouting out that, yeah, like we have a super exciting publishing activity happening in the Midwest. And I think we need to make sure that we're not underrated in that area. But Apryl, I think it's time to, enough about us. I think it's time to bring on our authors, right? Do you want to kick us off with our first author?
Okay, this is so exciting. So we have quite a few debut novelists here with us today. The first person I'm going to introduce is Dane Barr. He is the author of The Houseboat. Dane was born in Minnesota, which is hey, Dane.
Hi.
And he now resides in Washington State with his wife and kids. This book, what I saw really was a mix. I felt like it was like a gothic grit mixed with mystery shroud. It seemed really, really cool. And, I am very interested in reading it because I really like mystery and true crime.
Well, yeah, it's an honor to be invited to this, truly. And thank you all for putting this on. And I'll just read you the jacket copy as a kind of an introduction. It's as you said, it's a kind of a mid-century Heartland Gothic set in a small town in Iowa in the 1960s. Local outcast Rigby Sellers lives in this dilapidated houseboat moored on the Mississippi River. And with only stolen mannequins in the river to keep him company, Rigby begins to spiral from the bizarre to the threatening. As a year of drought gives way to a season of squalls, a girl is found trembling on the side of the road, claiming her boyfriend was murdered, and the townspeople of nearby Oscar turn their suspicions toward Sellers. Town Sheriff Amos Fielding knows this crime is more than he can handle, so he calls upon the regional marshal up in Minnesota, and Detective Edward Nass arrives in Oscar to help him investigate the homicide and to kind of diffuse the growing unrest. But Ness, suffering from his own demons, is determined to put his past behind him and solve the case, but soon more bodies are found. And as Ness and Fielding uncover the disturbing facts about Sellers, a great storm floods the Mississippi, threatening the town, and Oscar has pushed the breaking point. Even Ness may not be able to prevent. So, The Houseboat.
Well, I'm excited to check it out. I think it sounds pretty great, honestly.
Sounds amazing, and I'm feeling a big Mayor of Easttown vibes coming to mind for me as well. I'm really excited to introduce our next author, Kelsey Ronan. There's Kelsey. Hi, Kelsey. Kelsey grew up in Flint, Michigan. Her work has appeared in Lit Hub, Michigan Quarterly Review, The Kenyon Review, and elsewhere. She lives in Detroit and teaches for Inside Out Literary Arts. Chevy in the Hole is her first novel. So Kelsey, can you tee us up for understanding what Chevy in the Hole is about?
Sure. I wish I would have gathered my copy together like Dane did. That was way cooler than what I have. So Chevy in the Hole comes out in March of next year. It is a novel set in Flint that follows two families in Flint from the labor strikes in Flint at General Motors in 1937 to the ongoing water crisis. And at the center of the two storylines, there's a love story between a young man who's overcoming opiate addiction and a woman who's very freshly grieving the loss of her father. So both are trying to kind of make amends with themselves and with the city.
Sounds amazing. And I think there's lots of, there's a shout out to you in the chat. Drew is already blowing an air horn for you. So clearly.
I know who that Drew is. Thank you, Drew.
All right. So our next debut author is Kai Harris. Hey, Kai. Hey, all right. So Kai is actually from Detroit, Michigan, which my father is from Detroit, Michigan, and he is very much Detroit like my entire life. So I know it's totally a thing. So I was like, ooh, I like that. And you're currently located in the Bay Area. And this book, I was like, whoa, this looks amazing. It's really a coming of age book. And I'd love for you to tell us more.
Yeah, thanks, April. Yes, so What the Fireflies Knew, out February 1st of next year. It is a coming of age story. Even though I'm from Detroit, the story ends up being set mostly in Lansing, Michigan, because right at the start of the story, the 11-year-old protagonist, KB, witnesses the death of her father, who has overdosed. And so although the family lived in Detroit, they end up being taken, KB and her older sister, Mia, are taken to Lansing to spend the summer with a grandfather who they barely know. So it's KB's coming of age story as she spends this summer in Lansing, really just working through the trauma of her father's death and her mother's disappearance, also dealing through some sibling issues as her older sister no longer really wants to hang out with her as much as she wants, and meeting friends who are also keeping secrets and learning about her family's history. So one of the big things for KB is just learning that this idea of the perfect family that she's always been clinging to, she's going to find out over the course of the summer that that's going to look a little bit different than she expected, but she might still get her happy ending. So.
Your book really does sound beautiful. I have a tween myself, so I really connected with that. I was like, oh my God, it's my life. No, it seemed like a very beautiful story. And, I think we're all excited to definitely check out your new debut novel.
Thank you.
Well, and I am so excited to bring on our next author, Nicole Baart. Nicole, it's good to see you. Hello. Nicole is the mother of 5 children, the co-founder of a nonprofit organization, One Body, One Hope. So she's totally not busy at all the time. She lives in a small town in Iowa, and she is the author of 9 previous novels, including You Were Always Mine, Little Broken Things, and The Beautiful Daughters. And so, Nicole, this is your 10th book coming out in November, right? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I am so excited about this book. Everything We Didn't Say comes out on November 2, and it's the story of Juniper Baker. She's a special archives librarian in Denver, Colorado, and she returns to her hometown in Iowa, ostensibly to help an old friend. But really, she's back to investigate the nearly 15-year-old double murder that ruined her life and win back the 13-year-old daughter that she left behind. It's a domestic suspense novel that's firmly grounded in a rural Midwestern setting. It deals with themes of family, the environmental impact of big agriculture, and the double-edged sword that is small town life. As the narrative toggles between past and present and summer and winter, June's 19-year-old naivete and her much more jaded 34-year-old self, her story unfolds in just some really unexpected ways. It was crazy fun to write. It took me 2 years. I rewrote it completely 3 times, and it was just a lot of fun. It's stylistically reminiscent of Little Fires Everywhere, and it will appeal to fans of Heather Gudenkauf, Wendy Walker, and Jocelyn Jackson.
Thank you. Yeah, this book gave me major book club vibes. I remember like the first time I was reading the description, I was like, this seems like something where like there's a lot to discuss here, and I'm going to have a lot of feelings after I finish it. So I'm really excited. Congrats on your 10th book.
Thank you.
All right. Last but not least, we have Kayla Chanel. She is a author from the Midwest, obviously, but this book, girl. Okay. Can we just say that it's just really reminiscent of Jordan Peele's movies? Come on, it is amazing. It was very Midwest Gothic, very suspenseful, and the name of the book is called These Bones. So it's gonna be good. But yeah, if you want to go ahead and just give us some input on your new novel.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me today. So These Bones is a generational story taking place in a town in Illinois and focusing on the African-American community there between 1900 and about 1963. And there are these various figures and folks who come along who have all of these interesting, almost supernatural abilities and powers that are torturing this town. But we find out as we go along that the real monsters was the racism we met along the way.
I'm into it. I am ready. It sounds phenomenal. You know, I definitely noticed, you know, it's just interesting. Even the names that you had given and that you threw in there, like the Bramble Patch and everything like that, everything just seems such a great idea. And I can't wait until, you know, we get to talk to you more about it.
All of these books sound incredible. Before we move to the next portion, I just want to give a quick reminder that we are taking any and all questions, so feel free to throw them into the chat or into the Q&A. Apryl and I will be asking them at the end. What I think is so cool is that now you all have questions prepared for each other, which I'm super excited to see what you all picked out as you were looking at each other's titles. So I think Apryl and I are going to go away for a minute, right, Apryl? And I think Dane, you're up first to ask a question of Kai, right?
Yeah. First of all, Kai, what a joy to read your excerpt. It was, read it many times. I wish I could have read more of it, but I was taken aback by many parts of that excerpt. But I love your use of repetition with the little girl in discovering her father, and through this repetition, in particular the word scream, it felt this internal, like an internal reasoning that she had to keep repeating things as if to make it true, or to convince herself otherwise. May I read you back to you? Can I read a little sentence? Okay. I think this is in the first section. I didn't scream at first when I found him there cold. I just walked back up the steps, quiet like Mama always taught me, and pushed open her heavy bedroom door. When I told her, she screamed, so finally I screamed. Mama screaming felt heavier, scarier, more real than Daddy lying limp in that little space beneath the stairs. That word, so I finally screamed. I just thought, wow. It was so stylistically done. So I guess my question to you is, when you started writing this, or anything rather, do you start with a single sentence that you find beautiful, or do you have the premise of the story in mind to get things going, and then those nice sentences just follow along?
Well, first, thank you, Dane. I appreciate you saying that I have nice sentences. That makes me smile. No, I do not start with the nice sentences at all. Typically, well, for this novel in particular, I actually didn't even start at the beginning. So what's the beginning of the novel right now wasn't there at first. This novel started off originally as a short story that I began writing during my master's program when I was living in Nashville. And it was actually a pretty different book at that point, because I wanted to, well, it was a story, not even a book, but it was a pretty different story at that point, because the entire storyline around the father's overdose wasn't a part of the story. It was instead a story about a summer spent with this grandfather, but it didn't have that backstory. That wasn't a part of it. And so what happened was, the now beginning came about as a part of a writing exercise that I did in class. And the writing exercise was asking me to do some things with language that I wasn't accustomed to. And that's actually how it evolved into what it is now. So never doubt writing exercises. You know, they're helpful. They can make you step outside of your box a little bit. But yeah, so the section you were reading from is actually what takes place prior to the first chapter. And so one thing I wanted to show was some of the differences between what KB is like in that moment, the moment when she finds her father's body, versus when the story begins 6 months after that. And so hopefully readers will notice that shift, because by the time we really get to meet her 6 months later, she's been living with this trauma for a while, and she's picked up some, a bit of anxiety and some new habits as a part of, because of that trauma, although she doesn't know that. And the book is told entirely through her voice. It's first person present tense. So we are just right there with her. So yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out and asking about that. That the beginning to the book is one of my favorite moments, although it was something that I wrote later down the line. Okay, so now I get to ask a question. I am off the hot seat officially, and I am going to put Kelsey on the hot seat. So as I was reading about Chevy in the Hole, a couple of things struck me. Being from Detroit, I actually have a lot of family in Flint, and I've sort of been there a bunch. So I was happy to hear about how Flint, I think there was something there about the book being described as a love letter to Flint and the resilience of his people, which I thought was just beautiful. But I wanted to ask a question related to a similarity that I noticed between our novels, which is that similar to what Dane was just asking about, the scene at the beginning of my novel, I understand that your book also begins with an overdose. And so I wanted to ask, I know for me, beginning that way had a lot of implications. It's a very heavy beginning, and then the trauma of that lingered throughout the novel for me in different ways, whether through my characters and, the way that the trauma is manifesting for them differently for different characters or that sort of thing, or plot-wise, how that, goes into what's going to happen next. So I would just love to hear you talk about how you feel like that trauma, that overdose at the start of your novel plays into the rest of the story for you.
Thank you so much, Kai. And I have so much to say about that I'm like, where do I begin? So the character whose overdose begins the book is very much based on my previous partner who passed from an overdose. So I was really interested in having this, like, I don't want to use the word redemption, but having this moment where someone very much like him could wake back up and have this different outcome. And of course I was thinking about, because he passed away before the water crisis, of what would that have looked like to be like placed into another context. I also have really strong feelings about the way addiction in general is dealt with in literature. There's not a whole lot of depictions of substance abuse. As someone who, was and continues to be affected very greatly by loving someone who had those concerns, there's not a lot of books out there that speak to my experience of that. Margaret Wilkerson Sexton's her fiction, I think, does a really lovely job. Jesmyn Ward kind of touches on that in some of her work. But so I had this desire to center someone with addiction at the center of a book, and to not make it a story in which that was the entirety of their person, and that like getting drugs and taking drugs was the entirety of their experience. The book begins in this pretty dramatic way of someone coming to from an overdose, and then there are no other scenes in the book of drugs. Instead, it's about family and community, and the kind of long-term like relationship effects and psychological effects of having those kinds of experiences. And I think, I don't really know how to articulate this yet, Kai, but when you were in some of the framing of your question and thinking about, you know, this is my sort of love letter to Flint. One thing that, like, from growing up in Flint, you know, I was born in the 80s, very much in like the first wave of the Michael Moore narrative of Flint, where Flint was kind of a punchline. And you saw the way that that shifted when the water crisis happened, and Flint wasn't funny anymore, but it was, this other narrative kind of took place. And there was a moment in, I guess it would have been 2016, where the New York Times published this piece on Flint and made this comment of something like, and the only people left in Flint are the people too poor to leave. And I don't want to discount that that's very true for many people, but there are also people I know who make that choice to be in Flint every day and have very passionate feelings about the city and its history, who wouldn't leave for the world. So I also felt in beginning a book with someone in like the depths of a crisis, and then having them kind of take ownership of Flint, and for Flint to be a place of like healing and joy, was also very important for me. And speaking of history, I have a question for Kayla, and I feel like I'm sort of cheated at this because I know a little bit about Kayla. But I would love to hear about how you're being steeped in Detroit's history and in your 9-to-5 life, if you could talk about how that's influenced the novel.
Absolutely, I totally can. So in my 9-to-5 life, I work as a public historian in regional history of Southeast Michigan. And so I come to the table to this historical generational novella with this sense that I wanted to tell a Midwest story about race and about culture that was more influenced by my own upbringing, because I grew up in a small town in Michigan, and my novel takes place in a smaller community. I think it's very important to kind of reframe the history of racism and race in this country as not just being a story about, well, people lived in the South and there was racism and then they had to move up here and then everything was perfect and it was all sunshine and rainbows and a couple of bad things happened, but nothing too bad. But that it was systems that were consistently being perpetuated even up here in the North. And that really was kind of the backbone of why, of where that came from. But in addition to that, I also, a lot of my history work comes from a place of wanting to understand dance and music culture specifically. So there's a lot of references to music in this book because it is something that so fascinates me. The story of American music is the story of people's struggles and people's turning art into, or struggle into art and creating an American soundscape and an American culture. And I found that very fascinating. So yeah. So my question is for Nicole. So as I mentioned, I grew up in a small town in Michigan, and knowing what small town life is like in the Midwest, that tension of constantly feeling like you're a bit under a microscope is there. And you mentioned that you had written you'd rewritten this book in several drafts to get it perfect. So how did that particular tension of small town living evolve throughout the different drafts to bring us to where we are today? I'm really excited to read your book when it comes out in November.
Thank you. Small town living was the backbone of this book, and it's where I began. I grew up in a small town of about 6,000 people. Met and married my husband, moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, millions of people, and ended up coming back, which we never planned to do. But we had a child and the draw of, yeah, the idyllic small town life and being back by family and people that we knew. We have latchkey or free range kids. Our kids can go wherever they want to, hop on a bike and go to school or whatever. And we thought that sounded really great. However, and those of you who have lived in a small town, that there is a dark side to it too. People are up in each other's business. They know more than they should know. There are certain ways that you have to act and behave. My small town, I love it so much, but we have very odd unwritten rules, things like you can't mow your lawn on a Sunday. And I don't know why people get angry. And it's just this constant dance of, I love this place and I love the people in it. And yet there are some traditions and some things that we have just accepted as normal that simply aren't. And after a really hard season with my family, honestly, we were targeted by what would probably be considered a cult. I just really struggled with that, and my family really struggled with that. And in a lot of ways, this book was my way of dealing with the difficulty of that time. And through the eyes of my character, trying to explore living in this place that we love so much and yet struggle with. So we're still here. There's about 8,000 people in our town now. So it's grown a little bit, but it's quite the place. And it's all over the pages of everything we didn't say. Juniper's small town is about 4,000 people. And because of a double homicide there and the fact that her family is tied to it, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of gossip, and yeah, it's the backbone of the book. So thanks for asking that, Kayla. I have the final question, and it is for Dane. Dane, you are a literary unicorn. You don't exist online, and no matter how hard I dug, I couldn't find you. Like, there's no website, there's no social media, there's just not a lot about you. So I had to dig pretty far, but I did end up coming across an article, or I guess it was an interview that you did in 2014. Probably don't even remember it. That was a really long time ago. But it was about a short story that you wrote, and the short story was about a houseboat. And it made me wonder if that was the beginning of your novel and how long you've been working on this book. Did it begin in 2014 or before that? And yeah, where did it come from? We'd love to know a little bit more about your book and the genesis.
I assume you're referencing the Midwestern Gothic.
Yeah.
Article. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kelsey Ronan, I think, was published in Midwestern Gothic. You might even know Rob. Anyway, no, it was the very first chapter, which is now the prologue to the book. But I wrote that back when I was. The book only took to what I sent Harry, my editor, it only took about a month and a half to write the book. The short story came very quickly. And then we kind of rearranged it, but I'd written it when I was 30. I put it away, and then during that period, I started a small press called Dock Street Press, and we were putting out other people's books at that time, and so I just put all of my work in the drawers and tried my best to get those other authors' books out in the world. So yeah, it's now the prologue, and it describes the kind of the fickleness of being in the river country of Northeast Iowa on the Talus Slope, when everything smells like, I don't know where you're from in Iowa, but Oscar's a fictional town, fictionalized of Decorah, Iowa. And if you've ever been to Decorah, Iowa, you can go down there, especially in the summertime. You just kind of look around, put your hands in your pockets, and it smells like the sun and the limestone and the humidity in the river, and it just has this very smell to it. But I did twist it with being up here. We live east of Bellingham, and there are some pretty backwoodsy kind of people living in junkyards. If you kind of look back, and I was always curious as to, like, what's going on back there? What are they doing? And You just catch glimpses of it when you're driving past in the wintertime when the tree or the leaves are all gone. And we were out, I'll make this brief, but we were out sailing one day and we had dropped anchor, and this dilapidated old seiner boat, this wooden boat, comes up and it has this big, 50-foot catch lashed to the beam of it. And he pulls up, and I mean, he's ghosting along, and like you can see the smoke rings coming out of the stack. And he stops his boat and he opens the door, and this god awful smell comes out, and he's got these Coke bottle glasses, and he's like, I got grandma buried in this boat. I got grandma, and I was just going, oh, this is Rigby. This has to be Rigby. So I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question or not. I probably trailed off and got a little on a tangent, but that's where the start of the book, I guess, came from. Yes, all came from that short story.
Thank you. It was awesome. And I'm Northwest Corner, but I do know Decorah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question.
You bet.
We're back. These were such great questions. I feel like I was sitting here thinking about how both bummed and happy I am that like these books aren't all out on the shelf now. Like, how you get like really excited and you're like, yes, I can't wait, like this. And I know a customer is going to come in and is going to like describe one of your books perfectly to me. Like that's the book that they're looking for. And I'm gonna be like, listen, let's talk about pre-orders, how important they are. And let's throw up a pre-order, which is true for everyone except for Kayla, because your book came out yesterday. So if anyone else is feeling that same way as me, I just wanted to highlight that you can immediately go buy Kayla's book and sell it. And then what's nice is that you all have like a nice flow of like, when you look at the timeline of when all these come out, I'm like, okay, I've got my like next 6 months like pretty well lined up. Like I know what I'm going to be hand selling as my Midwest favorites. So this was such a great questions that you asked of each other. And I wanted to return to that idea of community. A reminder to everyone watching, feel free to throw questions in the comments. Apryl and I certainly have plenty of things that I know we're ready to ask the authors about, but we would love to prioritize your questions over ours. So my first question is, I think what's something that has been really special about community is also learning about author communities and how they play a role in your book getting out. I think something like I've heard a lot of feedback from participants of our virtual events of like, the joy of like, there's a positive spin to being virtually. It's that you can kind of pick whoever your ideal conversation partner is, and it doesn't matter because you all don't have to be in the same location. So I've just been really like thinking about that and would love to know how your author community supported you in getting this book out, or like what that means to you. And maybe Kayla, since it is your book one day birthday, maybe you can start us off, but then anyone who wants to take that after Kayla responds, would love to hear everyone's thoughts on that.
I think one of the big things is that the books, the other authors within my publishing house, my publishing network at Lanternfish, have been tremendously helpful in spreading the word and reading and giving their feedback. It's been so incredible. And also these bones started as a project I was working on. And as I was writing various pieces that formed the novel itself, I got to get a lot of feedback from people who I really respected their work and was able to have deep, in-depth conversations with folks. Like, is this working? I don't know. Can you please read this? And like, contextless, does this make sense? And in context, does it make sense? So I've had a really good opportunity to be able to have other people's feedback throughout the entire process of writing these bones.
Interesting. So, I just feel like the process, I don't know how you guys are doing this, especially right now. How has the process, back to what Stephanie was saying, talking about community, during COVID, how has this affected your writing? How has this affected, your books coming out? Because I just know as a bookseller what I see when it comes to, printing and, people just constantly getting delayed. And, that can, personally, it would be for me, really take a toll. So how have you guys been doing, like, writing and getting your book out during COVID? And that's for anybody. Take it away.
I can start. It was very interesting for me because, I ended up selling my book in 2020 in the summer, so not long after we went into quarantine. And that was a wild experience. Just first of all, feeling so joyous about something at the same time that I felt like so weak about everything. So it was, it's a very complicated moment, but the process has been really great. My team is great. And I feel like I'm very thankful that I had this thing happen during this time in our lives, because it's given me, I feel like it's given me something to like hang on to, I'm like, okay, everything's not all bad. I have this, exciting thing going on, and my book is going to be in the world. And that's kept me really motivated, I would say. As far as writing goes, there was a period of time when we first, when the quarantine first began, when I was barely able to write anything. And I'm a person who usually processes through writing. It's usually easy for me to do it even when I'm in, in the midst of trauma or what have you. But I couldn't this time. I just could not figure it out. I have anxiety, and I was sick at the start of the pandemic, and I didn't know if I had COVID, but, back then they wouldn't test you if you hadn't been out of the country or like directly around someone who had COVID. So it was just all of this fear and all of this anxiety, and I couldn't write. And so I didn't know what to do, because writing is like my main like coping strategy. It's like my thing, not even just like writing books. That's not my coping strategy. That's a little more complicated, but just like journaling or, writing for fun, I couldn't even do those things. So I just had to like really slowly ease back into it. I honestly just started off saying to myself, I'm just going to like write a sentence every day, to just try to remind myself what it was like to live through this moment. And I started doing that. And after a while, I was like filling pages because I had so much to say that I didn't want to forget about what it was like. And so honestly, what ended up happening is that my writing really ended up picking up, during quarantine specifically, because I, also for a while wasn't working, and, everything was shifting, and my kids were home, but we were, shifting, I guess, like what was important to us, like all of the things that usually kept us so busy were off the table. So in a lot of ways, it allowed me to kind of focus in. Once I was able to get over that initial barrier and I was able to start writing again, then I feel like writing became so therapeutic for me as time went on.
That sounds right about it. I see everybody just trying to find their footing. Still to this day, we're all just taking it day by day, and we've been taking it day by day for almost 2 years, and it's exhausting. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's very difficult. And, what I see when people come into the bookstore, they're always, books are a connection. They're what people are looking for. And I thought that answer was pretty spot on, definitely. Stephanie?
Yeah, no, I mean, does anyone else have anything that they want to kind of comment on in that area? I think Kai started off great, but I don't want to.
Yeah, you guys take it away.
Well, during all this, do all of you write every day during this, or regardless of pandemic or not? No?
I do. Don't hate me.
No, I do as well. I take it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's like when you can go back down and sit and then just start writing, you kind of go, oh yeah, this is enjoyable. It's a fun thing. And some days are slower than others. Some days you get, like you said, you maybe get one sentence, but probably a damn good sentence. You know, some days are 3 or 4 pages.
Nailed it.
But yeah, no, that's, yeah, we have an infant who wakes up really early and a toddler who wakes up really early. So I'm usually out to, I'm out to the studio at about 5:15, and it's getting very dark in the mornings now. It's getting tricky. So I have to rub my eyes a little bit in the mornings, a little bit more, but no, it's all about, it all comes down to the writing. And I think all of us that we have now a book coming out, or as in Kayla's instance, a book out, I think the nice thing to do is just to get your head out of that realm and then just start working on something else. And it removes you from, maybe stressing out about this or that, or wondering, keeps you from checking your email and seeing if your editor or publicist has chimed in on something that maybe you thought, I don't know. So yeah, for me, it's all about the writing.
How are you so easygoing?
What? Me?
You're so easygoing. It's kind of refreshing to see.
Well, I don't know. Well, today me and my toddler, we went out, and winter is coming, and we got the chainsaw out and we cut up rounds, and we split wood, and he was standing there to the side of our little wood shed, and he was saying wood chop, and I chop wood. So maybe that's, I got some energy out of me. Maybe that's.
I do not like the reminder that winter is coming. I don't appreciate it.
No.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Bellingham winter is it's not as cold, but it's very dark and very wet. So
I already see my future in Missouri. Well, something I want to make sure that we get to, because each of your books is completely and obviously has this element to it. Your characters are just all amazing. And so I think what I love hearing from an author, and what helps me, especially when I'm hand selling a book, is I would love to hear from everyone what your favorite what is your main character, what is your favorite trait of theirs? And so maybe Kelsey, do you want to start us off, and then we can kind of just go around from there of like, again, just want to hear what your favorite trait of theirs is.
I was thinking about this when Kayla was talking. Actually, my protagonist is pretty obsessed with music. So that's my answer.
I love that. That's great. Nicole, what's yours?
So I have to tell you my fun story about my character and where she came from. When I was in college, it was the final party of my sophomore year. I met a guy and we really hit it off, and he was on his way to Yellowstone to work in Yellowstone National Park. He was a biologist, and so we were apart the entire summer, and this was before cell phones and stuff like that. And he wrote me a letter every single day, or it wasn't every day, every week or whatever. I got lots of letters from him from all over Yellowstone. And he would tuck these found things inside the letters. So sometimes it would be a flower, and other times it would be, something, a small rock or a piece of, I don't know, anything that he found. But one time he tucked a sprig of juniper inside this letter. And when I opened it up, I could just, the scent of it, and it was so sensual, just in the fact that it made all of my senses kind of come alive to smell this juniper. And I thought I have to write a book someday about a character named Juniper. So that's where she came from, like 20 years ago. The romance didn't work. He's not my husband. He came back from Yellowstone, and no, it wasn't right for us. But I still have the letters just because they're so cool. So Juniper is this character who's just incredibly resilient. She has gone through a horrific event in her life. And for her to 15 years later begin to put the pieces back together is just really inspiring to me. I think people who overcome huge adversity and come out the other side stronger are beautiful. And I think Juniper is beautiful. So that's mine.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's actually really sweet. I love that. That's awesome.
Kai, do you mind?
Yeah, so I was just about to talk about resilience. So since Nicole just talked about resilience, I'm gonna think of something else that I love about KB, who is very resilient, but also, you know what? I love how much she loves books. I probably love it because it allows the like bookworm in me to flourish. Because, you know, I think she actually maybe loves books more than I do though. But I was able to kind of channel what it was like in my childhood when I used to just read constantly. My sister couldn't stand it because she'd want us to go outside and play with our friends. And I'd be in the house reading a book. And I'd be like, no, I don't play. Why would I go outside and play? I have a book right here. I'm going to like go, you know, to all these other places in, you know, less time. So KB has a fierce love of reading. I gave her a couple of my book favorites. So she loves Anne of Green Gables, which was one of my favorites growing up. But, you know, I'm like kind of playing around with it a bit because she does have this moment where she realizes that, you know, all of these books that she loves and these characters that she feels like are just like her, you know, are not like her in some important ways. And, you know, as she starts to like learn about her identity, and especially her Black identity, she starts to realize like there are parts of her identity that she hasn't been seeing in some of her favorite books. And when she moves with Granddaddy to Lansing, you know, she starts reading other things. And, you know, he's an adult, so he has grown up books on the bookshelf. So she, you know, stumbles upon Their Eyes Were Watching God. That's the first book from his collection that she gets her hands on. And she has, you know, a bit of a tough time with some of it, but she starts to recognize herself and her sister and her mom in, you know, in that story. And that gives her a new layer of understanding about her life and her place in her life.
I love that so much. The amount of times that we get asked for, I want a book that like a real book lover character is in, is like up there. So that's you just really helped my hand.
Yeah,
Kayla?
I'm gonna pick the character of Esther. She is a quiet person, but she's extremely observant about everything around her. She is noticing the sweat droplets on people's lips, being like, I'm very suspicious about the way you're acting. She's noticing like the fact that, so she works as a nanny for a white family in the book. And she notices how when the young girl sees her older brother's friend, she notices immediately like, oh, she's attracted to him. This might be a problem later on down the line. And that's something I really just like really love about her, that she just sees all the little details.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I feel like I relate to that maybe. Dean, and can you close us out with telling us your favorite trait of your character?
Well, yeah, I think what novels should do, at least a good novel with good characters, you take them to places that you have at least slight interest or suspicions of, but are too maybe afraid or cowardly or whatever adjective you want to use to go there. But the book was originally titled Rigby Sellers, but the eponymous titles apparently don't sell well, so they wanted to change it. But I kind of, this book in particular, Rigby to a sense, I've always asked people that have read it if they've empathized or sympathized with him in a little way. I mean, he's a deranged lunatic, so they can't really love that side of him, but he's lost a lot in his life. He's seen no love, and seeing no love, how has that made him the person he is today? But I think nature itself is my favorite. I mean, it sounds maybe corny, but it's the favorite character for me. And especially put in the upper Midwest, nature is such a thing that you can't rebel in Minnesota or Iowa. both in the summer or winter, because it can kill you. And I think in this book, nature has a way of driving the characters, all the characters, to their limits. So I'm gonna say nature.
I love that. I
Yeah,
love
awesome.
April, we're at the end of our time.
I know, I can't believe it. I mean,
I'm so sad.
yeah, I'm like, hey, you guys want to hang out or?
It's been incredible. I think, yeah, Carrie's coming back on. Thank you so much for these conversations. Again, really excited. And I think there's lots of comments in the chat about how excited people are about these books as well.
And you guys, it's an amazing feat to see you guys debut your novels and just really going out there and putting yourself out there and those characters and your imagination. And it's really something you should all be very proud of yourselves for getting through. Seriously.
Well, thank you, everyone. I put the book room link in the chat. All of these authors' books are there. You got the URL to request a galley. When I realized I was posting it in the wrong place, I reposted. So I hope you all got those. But like I said, if you miss them, you can also go to the book room and request these authors' galleys there. So grab them, talk about them at the publishers, at each other on social media. Stay in touch, because galleys are a great way to keep the conversation going. So thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, April. And thank you to the authors and all the publishers for helping us produce this lovely event. And we will see you all next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.